When Lieutenant Commander James Hartley first heard Albert Bert Dawson's proposal in the grey dawn of January 1943, he nearly had the docker thrown off HMS Beehive. A rope system to reload torpedoes faster? Preposterous. The Royal Navy had been perfecting torpedo operations for decades. What could a docker possibly teach them? But Bert's calloused hands had loaded cargo in Liverpool docks for 20 years, and he'd watched MTB crews struggle with standard Navy procedures. What happened next would turn the Channel War on its head. 01:47 hours, 15th of January 1943, HMS Beehive, Felixstowe. The smell of diesel and salt hung thick in the frigid air as Lieutenant Commander James Hartley stood on the concrete pier, watching another motor torpedo boat limp back to base. MTB 234's starboard side bore scorch marks from German 20mm cannon fire. 3 crewmen were wounded, their mission, intercept an E-boat convoy. Result: 1 enemy possibly damaged, 2 torpedoes expended, 0 confirmed kills. It was the same bloody pattern every fortnight. The strategic situation was becoming untenable. German E-boats, Schnellboote as the enemy called them, were systematically strangling Britain's coastal shipping lanes. Fast, heavily armed, and operating in wolf-pack formations, they attacked convoys under cover of darkness, then vanished before British MTBs could respond effectively. From October 1942 to January 1943, E-boats had sunk 47 British merchant vessels. 47. Each one represented tons of desperately needed fuel, food, and ammunition that would never reach British ports. The tactical advantage belonged entirely to the Germans. Their E-boats carried 2 torpedo tubes and could reload and fire again within minutes, using an ingenious hydraulic system. British MTBs, by contrast, carried 2 torpedoes in fixed tubes. Once fired, the tubes were empty. The boat had to return to base, a journey that could take 2 hours to reload. By then, the E-boats had long since escaped. Commander Hartley had sent 12 formal reports to the Admiralty. The mathematics were brutal. British MTBs averaged 1.2 torpedoes fired per engagement. German E-boats averaged 3.8. The kill ratio reflected this asymmetry. For every E-boat sunk, Britain lost 2 MTBs and 7 merchant vessels. The Admiralty's response had been predictable bureaucratic deflection. Maintain current protocols. Reload procedures are standardized across all torpedo vessels. No modifications authorized without extensive testing. Hartley crushed his cigarette under his boot. Standardized procedures were killing British sailors. Inside the operations room, the atmosphere was tense. Maps covered every wall, marked with red crosses indicating sunken British ships. Lieutenant Peter Ashford, Hartley's second-in-command, was debriefing MTB 234's captain. "They were waiting for us," the young captain said, his hands still trembling. 3 E-boats, perfectly positioned. We fired both torpedoes, missed. They circled back and fired 6 torpedoes at us. 6. We barely escaped. Ashford marked the engagement on the map. Another red cross. "We need more boats," someone muttered. "We need faster boats," another voice countered. "We need," Hartley interrupted quietly, "to be able to reload our bloody torpedoes without sailing back to Norfolk every time." The room fell silent. Everyone knew it was true. Everyone also knew it was impossible. British torpedo doctrine had been established in 1923. Torpedoes were precision weapons weighing 1,600 pounds. Reloading required a crane, a specially trained crew, and a stable platform. Attempting to reload at sea was considered suicidal. One wave could send the torpedo through the hull. The German hydraulic system was specifically designed for their larger S-boat hulls. British MTBs, lighter and faster, simply couldn't accommodate such mechanisms without complete redesign. Redesign would take years, years Britain didn't have. Albert Bert Dawson had been standing in the corner of the room for 20 minutes, unnoticed. At 52, with grey hair and permanent squint lines from decades of Liverpool sun and rain, He looked like 100 other civilian dock workers now employed in supporting roles at HMS Beehive. His overalls were stained with grease. His hands were scarred from rope burns and metal splinters. Nobody expected him to speak. "Begging your pardon, sir," Bert said, his Liverpool accent thick and unpretentious. "But I might know a way." Hartley turned. "A way to what?" "To reload your torpedoes. At sea, like, without the crane." The room erupted in derisive laughter. One officer actually spat tea. Lieutenant Ashford stepped forward, already moving to escort Bert out. "That's absurd," Ashford said. "Do you have any idea what a torpedo weighs? What do you propose? We lift it with our bare hands?" Bert stood his ground. "No, sir, with ropes and leverage. Same way we load 12-ton cargo containers onto ships when the dock crane breaks, which it does, frequently." "This isn't a cargo hold, Docker," Ashford snapped. "This is naval warfare. Gentlemen." Hartley's voice cut through the noise. He was looking at Bert with sudden, intense focus. "What exactly are you proposing?" Bert approached the table, where a scale model of an MTB sat. He picked up a pencil. "Your boats already carry spare torpedoes below deck, right? Secured in the hold. Problem is getting them up and into the tubes. Too heavy to lift, no room for a crane. But you don't need a crane. You need a block and tackle system, a proper one, mind you, not the little things you've got now. Rigged with 4-part advantage. That means for every pound the torpedo weighs, you're only pulling a 1/4 pound." He sketched quickly on a notepad. "You fix a steel mounting point here on the cabin roof. Run your tackle line through it. Attach the hook to the torpedo's lifting eye. 4 men pulling together can lift 1,600 pounds easy. I've seen 2 men do it with the right setup. Then you swing it horizontal using a guide rope system. We call it a lazy line in the docks, and guide it straight into the tube. If your crew trains on it, I reckon you could do the whole operation in under 15 minutes, maybe 10. The room was dead silent now. 15 minutes, Hartley repeated slowly. "At sea, in the dark, in rough water." "Aye, sir. Seen it done in worse conditions loading merchant ships during November storms. Just needs practice." Lieutenant Ashford's face was red. "This is the most moronic thing I've ever heard. You're suggesting we turn His Majesty's motor torpedo boats into floating cargo vessels with ropes and pulleys like some medieval siege engine." "Well," Bert said mildly, "when you put it that way, it does sound daft, but it'll work." Hartley stared at the sketch. The simplicity was almost insulting. Decades of naval engineering, and the solution was rope, but the mathematics were undeniable. If British MTBs could reload even 1 torpedo at sea, they would double their engagement capacity. If they could reload both, they would match the E-boat's firepower. The tactical balance would shift overnight. "Every other option has failed," Hartley said quietly. "The Admiralty won't approve design modifications. We can't build new boats fast enough, and men are dying every night." He looked up at Bert. "Can you have a working prototype rigged on MTB 229 by tomorrow evening?" Bert grinned, showing 3 missing teeth. "I can have it done by noon, sir. Just need some manila rope, 4 pulleys, and permission to weld mounting brackets." "You have it. Lieutenant Ashford, you'll supervise." Ashford looked appalled. "Sir, this is an order." The room emptied quickly. Only Hartley remained, staring at the model MTB on the table. Somewhere across the channel, E-boats were preparing for another night of hunting. The channel waters had become their private killing ground, but perhaps, just perhaps, a Liverpool docker with scarred hands and a moronic rope trick was about to change that. The clock on the wall showed 02:15. Dawn was 4 hours away. By noon tomorrow, they would know if desperation had finally bred the innovation that conventional wisdom had prevented. Outside, rain began to fall on the cold January waters. 09:30 hours, 15th January 1943, MTB 229, Felixstowe Dock. The January rain hammered down relentlessly as Bert Dawson stood on the deck of MTB 229, shouting instructions over the wind. Water ran in rivulets down his face. His notebook was dissolving into pulp in his pocket. The welding torches hissed and spat in the wet conditions, and every man working was soaked through. Lieutenant Ashford stood under an umbrella on the pier, watching with barely concealed contempt. "This is madness," he muttered to Chief Petty Officer William Bill Roberts, who had been assigned to assist. "We're modifying a combat vessel based on cargo loading techniques from a docker who probably can't even read a blueprint." Roberts, a career Navy man from Plymouth with 30 years of service, said nothing. He had learned long ago that officers who had never worked with their hands rarely understood how things actually got done. He watched Bert direct 2 naval engineers as they welded a reinforced steel bracket to the cabin roof mounting point. "Careful with that angle," Bert called out. "Needs to be precisely 18 degrees off vertical, or the load distribution will be wrong and you'll tear the mounting clean off first time you lift." "How do you know it's 18 degrees?" one of the engineers asked skeptically. "Because I've done this job approximately 4,000 times, mate, and I've seen what happens when the angle's wrong. Lost a friend in Liverpool docks in '37 when a mounting bracket failed. Load came down on his chest. So you'll forgive me if I'm particular about the mathematics." The engineer adjusted his angle without further argument. The material constraints were severe. Steel was rationed. Manila rope, the strongest natural fiber available, was in short supply because the Philippines had fallen to Japan. Bert had to improvise, combining available hemp rope with wire-reinforced sections for the primary load-bearing line. The pulleys were scavenged from 3 different sources, 1 from a damaged crane, 2 from a merchant vessel being scrapped. By 11:15, the basic system was installed. 4 heavy-duty pulleys arranged in a cascade configuration. Steel mounting brackets welded to reinforced points on the cabin roof and forward deck. The lifting line ran through all 4 pulleys, creating the 4-part mechanical advantage Bert had described. A secondary, lazy line, a lighter rope attached to the torpedo's tail, would allow the crew to guide the weapon horizontally into the tube once lifted. "Right," Bert announced. "Let's test it." They brought a practice torpedo, essentially a weighted steel cylinder of identical dimensions, up from the hold. 8 men gathered: Bert, Chief Roberts, 4 MTB crewmen, and 2 dockers Bert had brought in. "Pay attention," Bert said. "I'll walk you through this once, then you'll practice until you can do it blindfolded. In combat, you'll have no light, rough seas, and possibly enemy fire. This needs to be muscle memory." He attached the main lifting hook to the torpedo's center eye. 4 men on the lifting line. Pull steady and even, no jerking. Roberts, you and I will handle the lazy line to control the swing. The rest of you stay clear of the loading zone. If this goes wrong, it'll kill anyone underneath." "Inspirational," Ashford murmured from the pier. "Lift." 4 men pulled. The mechanical advantage worked exactly as Bert had calculated. The 1,600-pound torpedo rose smoothly off the deck, suspended by rope. It swayed slightly in the wind. "Steady! Now swing it horizontal. Easy does it." They pulled the lazy line. The torpedo rotated, its nose pointing toward the empty starboard tube. "Forward! Careful! That's it!" The torpedo glided toward the tube opening. "Down 6 inches! Perfect! Now slide her home." The torpedo slid into the tube with a metallic clang. Perfect fit. The entire operation had taken 11 minutes. The crewmen stood in stunned silence. "Well, I'll be damned," Roberts breathed. "Again," Bert said. "We're doing it again, and again, and again, until you can do it in under 8 minutes with your eyes closed during a force 6 gale. For the next 6 hours they practiced, again and again. Remove the torpedo, lift it out, lower it, lift it again, guide it in. The crew's hands developed rope burns, their shoulders ached. The rain continued. They practiced in the dark with torches extinguished, learning to work by touch alone. By 17 hours, they had completed 23 successful reloads. The average time, 9 minutes 30 seconds. But theory and practice in dock were different from reality in combat conditions. Lieutenant Commander Hartley arrived at 18U. Just as the winter darkness settled over Felixstowe, he watched 2 practice runs in silence. "Impressive, Mr. Dawson," he said. "But can it work at sea? Only one way to find out, sir." "MTB 229 will conduct a trial run tomorrow night," Hartley announced. "Simulated combat conditions, North Sea Patrol Zone. If successful, we'll retrofit the entire squadron." He paused. "If this works, Mr. Dawson, you will have done something the entire Admiralty Engineering Corps couldn't accomplish." Bert shrugged. "Just rope and common sense, sir. Amazing what you can do when you stop thinking about what you can't do and start thinking about what you can." That night, in the ratings mess, the crew of MTB 229 sat, with hands wrapped in bandages, discussing the day's work. Sub-Lieutenant David Clark, the boat's torpedo officer, was cautiously optimistic. "It's brilliant in its simplicity," he said. "No hydraulics to fail, no complex machinery, just rope, pulleys and human effort. Very British, actually." "Very moronic, you mean?" another crewman joked. "But the kind of moronic that just might work." Outside, in the cold January darkness, the Channel waters waited. Somewhere out there, E-boat commanders were planning tomorrow night's operations, confident in their continued supremacy. They had no idea that a Liverpool docker with scarred hands had just introduced a weapon more devastating than any torpedo. The unpredictable ingenuity of desperation combined with working-class practical knowledge that no naval academy could teach. The trial was scheduled for 21 hours the following night. If successful, the Channel War would change forever. If it failed, men would die testing a moronic rope trick that senior officers had mocked. But as Bert settled into his bunk that night, he wasn't worried. He had spent 30 years defying physics with rope and leverage. The Royal Navy was about to learn what Liverpool dockers had known for generations. Sometimes the simplest tools, wielded with experience and determination, could accomplish what the most sophisticated engineering could not. Tomorrow night would prove it. 21:34 hours, 16th January 1943, North Sea, 12 miles off Felixstowe. MTB 229 cut through Blackwater at 32 knots, her engines a steady roar in the winter darkness. No moon, 6-foot swells, wind gusting to 25 knots. Exactly the conditions Lieutenant Commander Hartley had specified. Bloody awful. Bert Dawson stood amidships, one hand gripping the cabin rail, watching the crew prepare for their first combat condition reload test. He had insisted on coming along, despite Hartley's initial refusal. "They've practiced in the dock," Bert had argued, "but if something goes wrong at sea, they'll need someone who knows the system inside and out." Hartley had relented. Now, as the MTB pitched and rolled in the North Sea chop, Bert wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Sub-Lieutenant Clark gave the order. "Simulate torpedo launch. Both tubes empty. Prepare to reload starboard tube." 4 crewmen scrambled to the forward hold hatch. The real challenge began immediately. In the dock, they'd had stable footing. Here, the deck heaved unpredictably. As they hauled the practice torpedo up through the hatch, a wave slammed the starboard side. One crewman lost his footing, nearly dropping his corner of the weapon. "Steady!" Clark shouted. "Get that lifting hook attached." They managed it. The torpedo lay on deck, secured by 2 crewmen, while a third attached the main lifting hook. Rain lashed their faces. Salt spray reduced visibility to a few yards. "Lift away!" 4 men pulled the lifting line. The mechanical advantage worked. The torpedo rose. But now the sea's motion became a lethal variable. The suspended weapon swung wildly with each wave, a 1,600-pound pendulum that could crush a man against the cabin or smash through the deck housing. "Lazy line! Control that swing!" Bert shouted over the wind. Roberts and another crewman fought to stabilize the torpedo using the guide rope. The weapon swung left, right, then steadied momentarily. "Now, rotate horizontal, forward into the tube." A massive wave struck. The MTB rolled 15 degrees. The torpedo swung violently starboard. For a horrifying moment, it hung over the open water, the lifting hook straining. "Hold that line!" Bert roared. "Don't you dare let go!" The 4 men on the lifting line braced against the cabin, muscles screaming, as 1,600 pounds of steel tried to tear free and plunge into the sea. The rope creaked. The pulley bracket groaned. Then the MTB rolled back level. "In! Get it in the tube now before the next wave!" They moved with desperate speed. The torpedo glided forward, wavered, then slid home into the tube. Metal clanged against metal. "Secured!" Clark gasped. Hartley checked his stopwatch. 17 minutes, 40 seconds. Too long. Far too long. In combat, 17 minutes would feel like eternity. E-boats could fire, reload, and fire again in that time. "Again," Hartley ordered. "Port tube, and you will do it faster." They ran the drill 11 more times that night. Each iteration brought improvement. The crew learned to anticipate the sea's rhythm, to work with the roll rather than fight it. They discovered that 3 men could manage the lazy line if one was positioned forward to receive the torpedo nose, reducing confusion. They found that calling cadence, lift, steady, rotate, forward, home, synchronized their movements. By the 8th run, they had it down to 12 minutes. By the 11th run, 9 minutes, 15 seconds. Hartley watched in silence, his expression unreadable. When they finally secured the last practice torpedo and returned to base at 03:20, he gathered the crew in the operations room. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "what you accomplished tonight changes everything. As of this moment, MTB 229 is operational using the Dawson reload system. You will begin combat patrols tomorrow night." He turned to Bert. "Mr. Dawson, you will train every MTB crew in this squadron. I want 20 boats equipped and operational within 2 weeks." "Aye, sir." "One more thing." Hartley's expression hardened. "This system is now classified. We will not, under any circumstances, reveal its existence until we've used it in combat. The Germans believe our MTBs are one-shot weapons. That assumption is about to become their fatal mistake." The first combat test came 3 nights later, 23:47 hours, 19th January 1943. Channel 8 miles north of Dunkirk. MTB 229 and MTB 307, both equipped with Dawson systems, detected radar contacts, 3 E-boats moving southwest at 30 knots, a standard German hunting patrol. The E-boat commanders, Captain Lieutenant Hans Weber, commanding S-63, saw the approaching British MTBs and smiled. 2 British boats against 3 German ones. The British would fire their 4 torpedoes total, probably miss, then retreat. His boats would respond with 9 torpedoes and finish them. It was the same pattern that had played out dozens of times. MTB 229 fired first, both torpedoes at S-63. One missed, one struck the bow, but S-63's reinforced construction absorbed the impact. Damaged but operational, Weber ordered his boats to counterattack. They fired 6 torpedoes at the retreating British MTBs. The British boats turned sharply, evading. Standard retreat maneuver. Weber began composing his report. Another British attack repelled. Then something impossible happened. Both British MTBs turned back toward the German formation and fired again. 4 more torpedoes screamed through the darkness. "Impossible!" Weber shouted. "They cannot! They've already fired!" S-63 took a torpedo amidships. The explosion broke her back. She began sinking immediately. S-109 took 2 torpedoes simultaneously. Massive detonation. Gone in seconds. S-127, Weber's last boat, turned to flee at maximum speed. Behind him, 2 British MTBs were somehow still coming. Impossibly dangerous, impossibly capable. British MTBs had just demonstrated they could reload at sea. The Channel War's balance had shifted in less than 10 minutes. Weber's radio report, intercepted by British intelligence later, was frantic. British boats possess unknown reload capability, multiple torpedo launches, require immediate tactical reassessment. German naval intelligence received 3 similar reports that week. Confusion turned to concern. Concern turned to alarm. How were British MTBs, known to carry only 2 torpedoes, firing 4, 6? Some reports claimed 8 torpedoes from a single boat. The German High Command ordered immediate investigation. Were the British using new boats, new torpedoes, some undisclosed technological advancement? They never considered the actual answer: rope, pulleys, and a docker from Liverpool who understood that sometimes the best innovations come not from engineering laboratories, but from cargo holds, where ordinary men solve impossible problems every day because they have no alternative. The MORONIC rope trick had become the Channel's most devastating secret weapon. 15 May 1945, HMS Beehive, Felixstowe. The war in Europe was over. 7 days had passed since Germany's unconditional surrender. Across Britain, celebrations continued, but at Felixstowe, the atmosphere was more subdued, the quiet satisfaction of professionals who had done their job and survived to tell about it. Lieutenant Commander Hartley, now Commander Hartley, promoted twice since 1943, stood on the pier looking at the rows of motor torpedo boats. 23 boats equipped with Dawson reload systems. Every single one had survived the war. The statistics were remarkable. From January 1943 to May 1945, Coastal Forces MTBs, equipped with the Dawson system, conducted 347 combat engagements. They sank 89 confirmed E-boats, damaged 124 more, and successfully defended 612 coastal convoys. British merchant shipping losses in the Channel dropped by 73% within 6 months of the system's introduction. Equally important, British MTB casualties dropped by 64%. When your boats could reload and fight multiple engagements, they didn't need to retreat after firing their initial torpedoes. They could maneuver, respond, and dominate the engagement space. The kill ratio had reversed. Where E-boats once held a 3.1 advantage, British MTBs now achieved a 2.3.1 superiority. German naval reports from 1943-1944, now being analysed by British intelligence, revealed systematic confusion and demoralisation. E-boat commanders had reported supernatural British torpedo capacity, impossible reload speeds, and unexplained tactical advantages. The explanation had been 12 feet of rope and 4 pulleys. Albert Dawson received the British Empire Medal in a quiet ceremony in June 1945. Commander Hartley personally recommended him for the Distinguished Service Cross, but the Admiralty rejected it. Dawson was civilian, and the DSC was military only. The beam would have to suffice. Bert didn't mind. He returned to Liverpool docks after the war, resuming his work loading cargo ships exactly as he had before 1939. He never spoke publicly about his contribution. When younger dockers asked about the medal pinned inside his locker, he would shrug. Did a bit of work for the Navy, nothing special. But the sailors knew better. Chief Petty Officer Roberts, who had supervised hundreds of reload drills, retired in 1947 with full honours. He kept a length of manila rope in his study, mounted on a plaque with a small brass plate, the rope that saved the Channel, 1943-1945. Sub-Lieutenant David Clark, promoted to Lieutenant Commander, wrote a classified after-action report in 1946 detailing the Dawson system. The report remained classified until 1978, when a naval historian researching coastal forces operations discovered it buried in Admiralty archives. The historian, Dr. Margaret Thornton, was stunned. This fundamentally changed the tactical balance in coastal waters, she wrote in her 1982 book, Hidden Heroes, The Untold Stories of Britain's Coastal War. Yet virtually nobody knew about it. The men who operated these systems were sworn to secrecy, and they kept that oath even after the war ended. She tracked down Albert Dawson in 1979. He was 88, still living in Liverpool, still working part-time at the docks despite his age. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" she asked. Bert lit his pipe, considering the question. "Didn't seem important, did it? We won. That's what mattered. Plenty of people did brave things in the war. I just tied some knots. You saved thousands of lives." "Maybe, but the lads on those boats did the actual fighting. I just gave them a tool that made their job a bit less impossible. That's what you do in war, isn't it? Find ways to make the impossible a bit less impossible. Dr. Thornton's book brought the Dawson system to public attention. The Royal Navy officially acknowledged it in 1984, adding a permanent exhibit to the Coastal Forces Museum in Portsmouth. The exhibit features the original rope and pulley system from MTB 229, preserved exactly as Bert had rigged it. The broader legacy extended far beyond the war itself. The Dawson system demonstrated that innovative solutions often come from unexpected sources, that practical experience can outweigh theoretical expertise, that desperation breeds creativity, and that sometimes the simplest tools, properly applied, can defeat the most sophisticated opposition. Post-war naval doctrine incorporated this lesson. Training programs began including input from enlisted personnel and civilian specialists. The rigid hierarchy that had nearly dismissed Bert's idea was recognized as a dangerous limitation. Innovation, British naval doctrine now emphasized, could come from anywhere. The psychological impact on British national identity was equally significant. The story embodied everything Britain wanted to believe about itself: resilience in crisis, ingenuity under pressure, willingness to try unconventional solutions, and the essential contributions of working-class citizens. Bert Dawson became a symbol of the People's War. The idea that victory came not just from generals and admirals, but from ordinary people solving extraordinary problems. Commander Hartley, in his final interview before his death in 1991, reflected on the experience. "I nearly had Bert thrown out of the operations room. I was prepared to dismiss his idea without consideration because he was a docker and I was a naval officer. That arrogance almost cost us the Channel. The greatest lesson I learned in the war wasn't about tactics or strategy. It was about humility, about recognizing that expertise comes in many forms, and that sometimes the person with scarred hands and a Liverpool accent knows more than the person with the Naval Academy education." Albert Dawson died in 1983 at age 92. His funeral in Liverpool was attended by 47 former MTB crewmen, all of whom had used his system in combat. They carried his coffin. On it they placed a coil of manila rope. The obituary in the Times was brief. "Albert Dawson, dockworker and wartime innovator. His simple solution to an impossible problem helped win the Channel War. He remained humble about his contribution until the end." But the men who had fought on those MTBs knew the full truth. In their memoirs, in their quiet conversations at reunion dinners, they told the real story: how a moronic rope trick from a Liverpool docker had doubled their firepower, reversed the tactical balance, and saved countless lives. Sometimes the greatest innovations are the simplest. Sometimes the most important heroes are the ones nobody notices. And sometimes, when the impossible becomes necessary, it takes a working man with practical knowledge to show everyone else how it's done. The Channel waters are peaceful now. The E-boats are long gone. But the lesson remains: never underestimate the power of simple ingenuity, never dismiss unconventional thinking, and never assume that the best solution must be complex. Sometimes all you need is rope, determination, and someone willing to say, "I might know a way." The forgotten heroes of World War II deserve to be remembered. If this story of ingenuity, resilience, and British determination moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more untold stories from the People's War. Hit that like button if you believe that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when the stakes are high enough. And in the comments below, tell us what unsung hero from your own family's history should be remembered. Let's keep these stories alive together. Thank you for watching.